We can now move on to Shai from CrazyLabs. Shai is going to talk to us about long-lasting publishing, how to create hyper-casual hits that cross the 100 million download threshold. So, Shai, are you there? Hey, how you doing?
Hey, I'm here. How are you?
Hey, how you doing? So, I'm going to hand straight over to you so we can get straight into it.
So today we'll talk about long-lasting publishing and how to create hyper-casual hits that can cross the 100 million downloads mark. So my name is Shai. I'm the head of publishing here at CrazyLabs. So a bit about CrazyLabs. We're a top 3 publisher worldwide. We've just peaked 4.7 billion downloads and have over 200 million monthly active users. And these are some of the games that we've released over time. And I'd like to draw your attention to the games that crossed the 100 million download mark or just about to reach this. Because today we'll talk about the key elements that we need in order to reach this milestone. And we can see that the average time that takes these games to reach 100 million downloads is anything between 6 to 12 months. Now, before we move forward and talk about 100 million downloads, let's talk about the hyper-casual market. We see that this is a report by Google, by the way. We see that the average gaming industry is growing around 2% year over year, while hyper-casual is growing 19% over year. And this can cause this kind of boom in the industry and allows these games to reach the 100 million downloads milestone. So what kind of games can cross 100 million? It's interesting to look at the industry as a whole. And we see today that games, hyper-casual games peak even after their launch. And we see that the download momentum remains post-launch. While looking back, we saw that hyper-casual games reach the top rather quickly, and then a few months later, they disappear. And we see today that this is totally different. And we see that the download momentum and the stays long after the first launch. Now, we've seen the growth in hyper-casual. We see the report by Google showing that hyper-casual is by far the most growing genre so far. And we've seen that some of the sub-genres that we've might have considered niche in the past, today with the growth is now considered the sub-genre on its own. Today everyone has a phone and there are potential to become a hyper-casual player, and this causes these kind of niche genres or niche sub-genres to become a genre on their own and can help the growth of the hyper-casual market by adding these sub-genres and becoming complete genres on their own. Now, taking a step back and looking what are the key elements in order to reach this 100 million milestone. And, some people call hyper-casual now hybrid casual, but to be honest, this kind of growth is simply because the hyper-casual is maturing. However, the basic is still the same. So the concept, the idea, the gameplay, the core gameplay loop, low CPI, the ability to market the game, and the high retention are the basics of this what we call hybrid casual, or the growth of the hyper casual, and this remains the same. Now, let's talk about the specific game, Tie-Dye, one of our most successful games, and take you backstage to some of the features and content that was added during the scale and post-launch of the game that helped reach this 100 million milestone. So one of the first things that I want to show you is the contests. Now, this is not a standard hyper-casual feature that we see in many hyper-casual games, but everyone loves to compete. And this kind of competition gives a player a sense of progression and a totally new dimension to the game. However, these constant contests don't appear all the time, and players come look for them, and it gives a player a whole sense of a whole new level of gameplay that they can play. And we can see that this kind of feature is very, very successful. Taking this step forward, and we've seen that players are now able to enter the contests, but we've added a new feature that is now called voting. Players have the ability to enter the contest and be a participant in the contest, but by enabling them to vote during the contest, it gives them now a sense of self-expression. Now, instead of just being a contender, they are also a judge, and doing that also expose them to new content, new designs, different design features, and at the end, it gives them the ability to receive unique rewards that they wouldn't be able to receive them differently. Now, I know this is not a standard hyper-casual feature, and it's taken from casual, but as I said today, you can call it hybrid casual, you can call it hyper casual, but these features are added post-launch and are able to dramatically change the whole game itself and improve the usage and the retention. It can help drive these kinds of games to reach this milestone. Another feature, accessories, stickers, clothing, essentially we call them collectibles. Now, collectibles you can find in many of the casual games, but these kinds of collectibles are something that can be a game changer. Everyone loves to collect different unique items and rewards, and it gives the players a sense of ability to continue to play the game. You know, these kinds of collectibles, once they receive them and they're very unique, it's harder for them to leave the game. It helps them to continue play the game. They're able to collect these rewards. They are very rare, very unique. And what eventually it causes them is to continue play, but they're demanding more and more content. They want more rewards, they want more content, and they want more unique rewards. And this, on the other hand, gives us the ability to add these kinds of content and features that players demand to. One of the last features that I want to show you here today is the photo album. Now, the photo album enables the players to collect and save the designs that they created during the gameplay, and it gives them the ability to later share it. But it's more than that. Now they strive to broaden their collection. They strive to create better designs, more designs. They want to share it with their friends. Now, after they created the design that was a part of the contests, they can see if they want a specific reward for that, they are able to share it and show it to their friends. It gives the game a complete new level of gameplay. And now the core gameplay loop remains the same, but this kind of feature, like the photo album, enables the players to be more connected to the game. It gives them the ability to show their friends what they've done. They now see their progression. They are seeing their past success. And by that, they're able to play for longer and enjoy the game on a totally different level. And I think that these kinds of features, especially the photo album, are complete game changers. And you know, we're not seeing them in many hyper-casual games, but today we see that these kinds of features are key to the success of the game and the growth of the game post-launch. Now, taking back to what we've talked about today, we see that hyper-casual games today show a very positive post-launch momentum. We see that this momentum is growing rapidly after the launch itself, differently than what we saw in the past, when we see that hyper-casual games reach the charts very quickly but disappear after a month or so. But we see that the core mechanic and the core gameplay loop, the retention and the marketability of the game is the basics of these kinds of games, and they are the same and remain the same. And in order to reach the success of these kinds of games, you have to have the basics of that. We've seen some of the features that were added post-launch, and of course, all these features were A/B tested and later added to the game itself. Once you launch the game, it's very important to work with your publisher and to work with the game product team, create a roadmap that enables you to understand what kind of features you want to add, what will be the next A/B test, and what you want to later add to the game. Now we know today that post-launch is very important. We see these features are critical to the success of the game. So work together with your publisher to create a roadmap that can help you increase the output and improve the game and keep it live for as long as possible. And these kind of features that we see that are taken from casual games that are not the hyper-casual genre games that we see in most games are important to the growth of the hyper-casual market. You know, you can call it hybrid casual, but as I said, to be honest, it's simply a mature of the hyper-casual genre and the hyper-casual market that we see today that enables us and enables the developers to reach these milestones more and more. And it's important to understand that once you launch the game, it's not ending there. You have to keep working on the game. You have to add content. The players will want to have more content and new features differently than what we've seen in the past. Now, everything that we've discussed here today is a part of the CrazyLabs Accelerator program that we have all around the world, in India, in Turkey, in Serbia, in South Africa. It's essentially a program where you get funding and mentoring that enables you to understand the hyper-casual market and enter the hyper-casual market. You can search for the CrazyLabs all around the world and see more information on our site. And one last thing that I'd like to mention is that our data-driven success competition in partnership with App Annie has a new deadline, and it's been extended until October 10th. And this competition enables you to first receive the ebook and webinar that every hyper-casual developer and studio needs in order to understand today's hyper-casual market and a lot of data that can help you create a better prototype and more prototypes. You can definitely sign up for the data-driven success competition. You can find it on CrazyLabs.com website. And I think this is pretty much for today. I'd like to thank everyone for joining. And Oscar, if we have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
We have so many questions, Shai. That was really fantastic. And I think, what you're kind of describing, frankly, I want to go on one of those courses. Because I'm always keen to learn more about way different things are designed, and I spent so much time thinking about design, and I'm sure I overthink my design constantly. So I'm sure I would get loads of this stuff. Right. So a couple of things that come straight up. So, how much time should games like this take to make? Now, obviously, I'm talking more about the kind of the hyper casual stuff necessarily than the hybrid, but I think it'd be quite interesting to see if there's a difference between the more hybrid style versus the hyper style, or even ultra
yes.
hyper.
I have to be honest, I don't see a difference between what people call hybrid casual and hyper casual. As I said, the core basics are still the same. The high retention, the low CPI is what enables you to reach a point where the game can be published. And to answer your question, as fast as possible. It can take anything between 4 to 8 weeks or sometimes even longer. But what's important for developers and studios to understand that now they've reached a point where the game is published, it doesn't end here. And in order to continue developing the game and continue to scale the game and reach these kinds of milestones and tons of downloads, you have to create a roadmap that you will have to continue developing and adding features and A/B testing tons of stuff. Some of them you'll have to scratch because they're not good enough. Some of them, they are very successful, like the features that I showed you today. But I'll guarantee that the developers that work together with us, a good example is by tie-dye developers. They are constantly working on the game years after the game was already launched. And the reason for that is that we see these kind of hybrid casual games are able to continuously remain in the charts because you are able to increase the ARPU while improving the game, adding more content, because the players today will also demand that.
Well, I mean, I think what you're highlighting there is kind of where I'm coming from. So I'm obviously looking more at living games, so longer term retention-based games, which do require more kind of focus around the context loop and so on and so forth. But I think where we're absolutely aligned is that that stuff comes out of continually developing something once you know it's working.
Exactly.
And I think the barriers between what is a hyper casual game versus what is a living game is going to be increasingly blurred, because the lesson I think from hyper casual is the amazing kind of fortitude of the process. Only building the things that has an audience potential, doubling down on the fun of that experience so that you can retain them, finding opportunities within the flow of that experience to monetize, whether it's through ads or through IAP, basically working out why people should care. And I think that, to me, is the same principle regardless of what kind of game you're playing, and also regardless what platform you're designing for. But we just don't have the tools to do the direct UA for PC or console games. They don't have the responsiveness. And frankly, I worry for those publishers on those platforms if ever we get the tools, because I think they're dead. I mean, okay, I'm exaggerating to the PR line, but if you think about it, that if you guys were able to do the stuff that we're able to do on console and PC as effectively as we can on mobile, that intimacy that can never happen on PC, but that intimacy that we have with mobile.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? I mean, are these techniques something that should be applied in other platforms as well? I mean, do you think this is a purely unique thing to the nature of the mobile phone being in your pocket?
Well, it's hard to say. First of all, we see that these action items that we're taking are highly successful, and obviously, if other platforms were able to implement that, there's no reason that these won't be successful. But they're still growing, and they don't have all of the tools that we're able to see and do. For example, in the mobile, on hyper casual games, we see the changes very quickly, and anything that you implement after 2, 3 to 5 days, you already know if it's successful or not, while different platforms might take a bit longer. So the process would be different. But one thing that I totally agree with you is the blur between the hyper casual and the casual and the other platforms, because today the only difference is if you're able to launch the game quickly and prototype quickly, while in what you call long living games, casual games, or other platforms, it takes a very long time to develop the game. You have to invest a lot more money and efforts in order to understand, and in order to develop and only then understand if the game is successful. While in hyper casual, you understand very quickly. You have exact KPIs that you need to reach in order to publish the game. But later on that stage, once the game is launched and post-launch, I do agree, it's completely the same. You have to add content. You have to give the players more and more.
And I think that relies very much on data. But that, of course, opens out the other bugbear, which I mentioned in my kind of introduction to the session, with IDFA removing the SCARAD network, with things like the age-appropriate design code, with things like GDPR, we are seeing an unprecedented kind of assault, and probably rightly so, on the way that we capture data. So we have responsibilities. Can we still use the data that we need to get the game experience for players that will make a better game, or are we basically hampered? Are we finding that we're now having to design with one hand behind our back, and actually it could be at the detriment of play? I mean, I'm trying to present both extremes of the argument. Obviously, the truth is somewhere between two, but I'd love to know what you think.
To be honest, in my opinion, you said you have one hand tied behind your back. I don't see that, because in hyper casual, you don't really target players. You don't collect specific data on the players themselves. The only thing that you need to make sure is that you are able to prototype a game and a concept that is going to be able to appeal to a very mass variety of audience. Differently, you're not targeting a specific audience or a genre. It's very wide and much different, and the data that we have today that we're able to collect and be responsible about it is not something that is not able to share. The players are able to share, and I don't see that it affects much the hyper-casual market.
And I think you nailed it there. I think this is actually the lesson for other developers who are doing more long-term living games. Obsessing over the targeting of individuals as opposed to interest groups, I think is a mistake. Now, don't get me wrong, it's lovely to be able to retarget people in terms of like, here is a specific message that I know will appeal to you because I know you have played this game, that game, that game. But if we don't have access to that because of the privacy connotations of that, that's fair enough. Instead, we know what those people actually enjoyed. Therefore, we present them with information related to that. And I think that makes life, easier from a marketing point of view, but also focuses on what's important, i.e. what do people actually care about. There was another question here, which is around the peak hypercasual. I think John kind of raised that spectre. And also other people have talked about hypercasual market becoming saturated. Do you think that's the case, or is it just another hill to climb and another hill will appear afterwards?
Well, I've been in the hyper-casual business for a while now, and every year you hear the same people say again and again, and we've proved them wrong. We see today that it's probably not going to end anytime soon. It's just maturing, and these kinds of games and genres people love to play, and we've seen millions and hundreds of millions of these games being downloaded constantly. The only change that we see, and probably will see more and more, is the difference between the live operations of the hyper-casual games and what kind of updates and changes that you need to do to the games post-launch.
No, exactly, and I think that's a kind of key thing. One thing we have seen, obviously, in the last year or two, I only mention this because I was actually called as an expert witness on one of these cases. We have seen some more predatory publishers pushing against other publishers for the use of their game style, their content. Do you think we're going to see more aggressive actions by some of the publishers to try and retain their rights, or is it all going to come down to basically innovation anyway? I mean, from my impression of you guys, you're all about the innovation. Do you think you're seeing kind of a more aggressive business scene, or actually will that just roll itself out over time?
I think it depends on the publisher itself, and also depends on the partners and the developers that are working together with the publisher. We are working very closely together with the studios that partner up with us. We also feed them with concepts and ideas, and some of them are coming from their side. When we see something that is too close to something else, in my opinion, why go that way? It's one thing that I have to emphasize. It's okay to take inspiration from successful games and find something that will be totally unique. But if you want to scale a game, if you want to be scalable, if you want to remain it, if you want to reach 100 million downloads, you have to be unique, you have to be innovative. And I see tons of developers that are very innovative, and I think this is a great way to move forward with.
I mean, the particular case I was asked to advise on was the Voodoo versus Homer games. And in that particular case, I was able to demonstrate that the context of the game was completely different. And actually, the art itself was also not even original. But that's another subject. But I mean, the key point for me was that the way originality and differentiation can appear in a game is often not the first opening scene. It's often in the sense of purpose and progression. It's often in the kind of narrative. It's often in the kind of the player engagement. And I think that's why I think so exciting about hypercasual, because we're not just talking about the simple interaction touch. We're talking about the whole experience of a game, the verb of the game. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. Of course, I imagine that not talking about the specific case, I imagine that many developers take inspired by different games that are very successful. But if you're able to make it completely different, it can still remain under the same, let's say, mechanic or niche theme. But if you can make it completely different, if now the player who's watching your ad understand that this is a game that is totally different than the ad of a similar game that you thought it's similar, I think it's still okay. Again, as long as you're able to innovate.
Innovate. That's a great way to leave this talk. Shai, thank you so much for that. That's fantastic stuff.
Thank you for having me.
It reminds me, I need to write up the article I was going to write for Pocket Gamer on that case, but that's a different subject. Anyway, Shai, thank you so much.